tolerable.com, World's Lucas steering wheel holder. I just did 18-minute video, and my phone ran out of space in the middle of that making that video, so the whole thing was blacked out and unusable. So I got to switch over to my other phone, man. But it's so much work to move over all my apps. Anyway, yesterday someone asked about the Cubs hat. They're like, hey, do you just like the hat, or are you Cubs fan? Yes, die-hard Cubbies, man. Lived in Chicago for a long time, and I went to many games, usually 10 or 15 games a year. And I even went to some of the playoff games when we won the World Series some years back. And I distinctly remember, I'll get baseball nerdy here for a second, in the years building up to that, when Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant and all that gang came together, and it was magical. Like, we knew a couple years before that that was inevitable. You could see it in that team coming together. But I digress. Had a shower this morning, got some breakfast at like 4:30 in the morning, and I'm waiting on a load to get here that should be here any minute. Hopefully it's going to be here any minute. Hopefully, because it's going to be threading a needle to get to this 90, which is a little bit too long for one drive. So the driver who was bringing it here was out of hours, and he didn't get recaps until midnight. So if he left at midnight, he should be here any minute. I'm going to call here shortly and find out about that. If not, if it starts pushing, I'm going to have to get off the load and let a team take it, because it's just going to get too dicey. We got severe weather up in the Midwest, and it has to be at its 90 at 0500 tomorrow. And it's just, if it was fewer miles, if it didn't require 2 drives, I wouldn't be concerned, but it definitely is going to take 2 drives. So I got to have it, I'm going to have a 10-hour stop in there. So see how that goes. There was an amazing load available last night, but it went to, I had like 3 stops, one in Richmond, one in a part of Maryland that I hate, and then somewhere else in the Northeast. Paid like $3.50 a mile. But I was like, nah, I'm not. Nope. In the time of day and the days that it delivered and where it would leave me, that's the reason it pays so well. So it just, the time was bad, its 90 or its final destination was bad. Where it was going was bad. All the customers it was going to were bad. Like, there was nothing good about it except for the pay. So it's not worth it to me to take a $3.50 load and then be hung out to dry. Longtime subscribers will remember that happened to Jenna and I on a load that we took to Long Island that paid $8 per mile. And it was one of those deals where it's like, hey, we can't, that rate's great, we can't say no to this. But then we got absolutely screwed on the other end. We're stuck in Long Island, rush hour traffic. There's no truck stops in Long Island. We had to go across the bridge through Manhattan. You guys know how. And then getting out of there was just an absolute nightmare. Then we got a canceled load, and then we got a just shitty paying load. That was a pain in the ass, excuse me, to get out of there. So the $8 per mile, and it wasn't a lot of miles. It was like 300 miles or something, 350 miles or something like that. I mean, it's still great, but at the end of the day, it didn't make that settlement remarkable. Like, it was still a great pay, but just because of the way so I'm just, no. Why? I really bloviated on that. Sorry about that. So what I wanted to talk about real quick today, no intro, we're just going to jump right into it, is I've been able to, yesterday I had quite a few drivers come up to the truck, including the infamous, he's actually famous in my mind, Lenny, who I think is probably one of the easily the best trainers at Prime, TNT trainers. There's a lot of really good trainers, so one of the best. So don't get butt hurt out there. I'm not saying the best, but definitely one of the best. Guy's just an animal. Beast mode. Did 7,000 miles on his truck this last week. Of course, there's some carryover on that, but he showed me in the app he's going through all his loads. And I'm like, holy shit, dude. But that's been the case every time I've met him. Jen and I have known him for years, and every single time he's coming off of a beast mode week. So TNT students on his truck, he drives the old Prime Trucker Rob truck, the Freightliner. Anybody remembers Prime Trucker Rob when he was at Prime? Lenny has his truck. Well, it's Lenny's now, but you know what I mean. So I got to meet him yesterday. There were a few other drivers that came up to the truck this morning. I met one of my referrals, Vance. Sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. But he's been with Vince or Van, I think it's Vince. Been with Prime for a year and a half. He's a referral and is doing really well. And I love hearing that. I love hearing people who I refer come and tell me that it's been wildly successful for them. That's like music to my ears. One of the guys that came up to me, old timer, millionaire. When I say millionaire, I mean million plus miles. Been driving for like 2 decades or something. He was telling me to be encouraged with my little tiny human at home, and he was reminding me of what it was like back when his kids were my age when he first started. And boy, it took me back. It made me remember things that I never would have remembered in any other scenario. For example, in 1997 and 1998, when I was in high school, I worked at both the Blue Beacon and the Pilot on exit 86 in Fernley, Nevada, on I-80, about 30 miles east of Reno. And I went to high school out there. So it was such a different world back then. I did not have a cell phone. There's a Wendy's there. I don't know if it's still there, but there was a Wendy's there. You could smoke cigarettes anywhere in the truck stop. There were little ashtrays on the trash cans at Wendy's that you just carried to your table with you. So you could grab a meal at Wendy's, go eat it at your table, and then light up and smoke cigarettes. You could smoke in the casino. You could smoke anywhere in a gas station. And there was a phone room. Now, anyone who's under the age of probably 30 has no idea what a phone room is. But I distinctly remember that phone room. At that truck stop, they've probably blown out that wall and just extended the space in the main truck stop area now. But back then, the end over by the fuel islands was this big room. And at one end of it was a vending machine that sold phone cards, calling cards. And then at the other end was some payphones, like your traditional standard payphones. And then on each long side of the room, it had these long sort of bar tables. They were short, with chairs lining them and phones on the wall that you could sit there. And they had ashtrays. You sit there and smoke cigarettes and call home. So there was like probably 15 phones in this room. And on really busy days, there would be 15 drivers in there. That room would be filled with cigarette smoke and people sitting there calling home and talking for as long as possible, trying to, hear their kids' voices and talk to their significant others. And that was as good as it got, right? You couldn't, the husband or wife at home, back then it was mostly wives, because there weren't too many women in trucking back then, but your significant other or your wife or husband couldn't text you pictures or videos of your family, and you certainly couldn't FaceTime. Like, none of it. We had there were cell phones. I didn't have one at that time. That was pre-cell phone for me. People did have cell phones, but there was no data. Like you weren't gonna be emailing pictures or texting pictures or any of that. You didn't even have unlimited minutes. If you had a cell phone in the late 90s, you had very few minutes that you could actually talk on that. There were no unlimited plans. At the end of the 90s, they started, Singular and others started coming out with free nights and weekends, right? So after like 6 p.m., then you could talk as much as you wanted until like 6 a.m. or something like that. But your daytime minutes, business hours, you'd have like 200 minutes, you know, and that's nothing. You talk for 20 minutes and you've already used 10% of your plan. So the keeping in touch with your family and understanding how your kids are growing and all that happened with no FaceTime and only audio call. Very expensive calls too. So this gentleman was just like, you know, hey, it's tough. He said, but we had it a lot harder. And I was like, yeah, man, now that I think about it, because I was at the very end of the era of no data and no unlimited, no smartphones. You know, I think I had like a Nokia. My first phone was like a Nokia, what were they? Like 4400 or something, 4480, something like that, 4800. You remember a little brick looking Nokia, not flip phone, not a smartphone, not, you know, nothing. It had a game on it, I think, but it was the most ridiculous analog looking 8-bit game. Like if kids saw it today, they'd be like, what? This doesn't even make any sense. I don't remember what that game was, but it was hilarious. But he's right. Now you can FaceTime. I get pictures and videos all day of my son doing crazy shit. And I can FaceTime him every day. I can talk to my wife throughout the day. I have no concerns about how long I'm talking to them. No concerns about data. How, you know, there's no maximum of pictures or videos or FaceTime or any of that thing. Any of that, like, you can still very much stay connected. You can still very much stay in tune with how your kids are growing, and they can talk to you and communicate with you, make faces at you, see your face, still understand that you are who you are. And that's pretty magical, you know? I think we take it for granted. I know for a fact most people younger than me probably take that for granted because that's all they've ever known. But I was at the end of an era where I feel like it would probably be akin to those who lived their teen years when cars were invented, but most people didn't yet have cars. You know what I mean? Like at the very end of the horse and carriage era, where when they get 40 something years old, everybody's in a car, and virtually no one's on a horse anymore. You know, like back in my day, we rode horses, and you had to find a place where they could shit. You had to find a place where you could tie them up, and you had to water your car. That's what it feels like to me. Is the communication revolution, the digital age that came about in the middle of my life. It's kind of neat if you really think about it, to live both sides of that. So when I tell anyone who's young about, you know, well, if you didn't have cell phones, how did you talk to anyone? Well, you go to a payphone. You had to have numbers memorized. Lots of phone numbers. I think we probably all had at least 5 or 10 phone numbers memorized. You had to, or at least have them written down on. And a lot of people carried little notebooks, and that's what they would have their phone numbers in. Or you'd use a phone book. Like if you had a tire blowout and needed to get a mechanic, you had to walk to a payphone, use the phone book to find a mechanic or someone to come work on your tire or whatever, and have change or money to call them. And then you'd have to wait at that payphone if they needed to call you back. You go back to your vehicle or your truck and you have no idea, no updates, no ETA. Maybe they flaked off and went to another job. You would have no idea. It was, at the time, it seemed very normal. You know what I mean? But now, living in the age we live in now, looking back, that seems like archaic and very difficult. And it was. We just didn't realize it. We just thought it was normal back then. But turns out it was pretty damn difficult to communicate. So anyway, I don't want to take that for granted. You know what I mean? Because the dude's right. Like we have really good ability to communicate and stay connected with family out here on the road that didn't exist when he first started. It didn't exist 20 years ago. You just couldn't have that connection. You couldn't get those kinds of updates. You couldn't see your children grow up. You couldn't watch it happen. You would just go home every couple months and they would be a different human. You know what I mean? It's pretty damn cool. Anyway, what are your thoughts on that? I gotta call over and see if this load is ready or if it's left. Because if he didn't leave and if it's not almost here, I gotta get off the load. All right, guys, be safe, make good decisions, and as always, drive to thrive. Talk to you soon.